Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I hope everybody can hear me. My sound is on and my screen should be on. Welcome to the second session in the series on VS Code AL extensions. We had a kickoff last week together with David, Andre, and Waldemar. I think it was very worthwhile, and like Waldo also posted on Twitter, he came across something. I came across a couple of things in the 3 extensions that I wasn't aware of, and typically that was the goal for me personally to get this displayed and learn a lot of it. Today we have another trio being Bart, Waldo, and Rasmus. Welcome, guys. I'm very pleased to have you on, let's say, the second show, being the second one in a series of 4. Today, each of them will demo parts of their extension, and tell you why they build it, and tell a little bit who they are. This is the full list, and we programmed it to, let's say, this program. So today, Bart will show AL Toolbox. Waldo will show the CRS, still called CRS AL Language Extension. I think I made a typo that it's not a capital L. And Rasmus will show his AL variable helper. I'll leave it to them to give a short introduction on themselves. Before I'm going to hand over to Bart, he will be the first in line for today. For many of you, I think a resume, or let's say a repeat, I should call it, of the housekeeping rules for maybe some of you that are new. Feel free to interact, but your mic is muted and you cannot unmute it. The question window on the GoToWebinar control panel, use that one to feed in any question you have. I will pick them up. My name is Luc van Vugt and I'm the moderator for today. And let's say in between one presentation to the other, we'll pick up questions. So feel free to put them in the window. And yes, we crossed the border. Actually, the screenshot was of yesterday when the 500 did subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think today we already had 504 subscribers. So thanks for being part of this, and welcome, of course, to share it, use it to whatever use it makes sense to you. If you haven't been subscribed to our newsletter, this is this luckily short URL, and well, hand it over to anybody. I'm working on a new session. Well, that is more or less related to this. In the next, next week we don't have any session. Normally we have this bi-weekly rhythm, but now with the VS Code AL extension, we have a somewhat weekly, bi-weekly rhythm. On June 15th, the next session will be with James Pearson, Martin Sagi, and me. James and my extension is related to testing. Martin's is, well, a bigger one, and well, of course, to use to testing, but it's not specifically about testing. And then on June 22nd, we'll have our last session in this series by Rob, Johannes, and Christoph. And I'm working on the next session on July 6th, but there's nothing set yet. And that will, of course, be communicated in the newsletter. So if you want to get yourself updated up front, get an email pushed, subscribe to the newsletter. And before we're going to hand off to the next speaker, of course, always an invite to anybody to come up with a topic to suggest it, become a speaker if you want to. I can be of help if you would like to be a speaker, but the threshold is a bit big. But to me, I try to make the thresholds as low as possible, even though it looks maybe very perfect, whatever. It's more about sharing that it should be a perfect story. Thanks to our sponsor, ForNav, we can always do this. And that's the trigger to go and hand over to Bart. So Bart, I'm going to make you presenter, and I'll keep my sound on in that sense that I'm not muted. So let's check. Yeah, you're in view. So your slides are in view, Bart. That's and I think your sound also.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you,
Bart,
Luc.
yeah, the floor is yours. Have fun.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Bart. I'm the development lead at ESC in Ghent, Belgium. I'm very lucky to work together with an amazing team here at ESC. Other than that, I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to dive right into the code because I've only been allotted 15 minutes and AL Toolbox has a lot of features that I want to discuss with you. So AL Toolbox, available in the store. These are all the features. You can see it in the README in the store, and I'm going to showcase a few of them now. First of all, the most important one, and I think the one that it's most famous about, is the region functionality. First, let me explain why I created this region functionality. When I look at the code unit, I want to have a quick overview of all the functions. And without regions, when you collapse the code, then it looks something like this. And you have some extra lines that I don't really like when going through the code like this. Yeah, so that's why I created this extension. So let me uncollapse everything again. So when you run this, you can type create region, and then you can choose for all functions, triggers, data items, and columns. So let's try this one. What it does now is he created regions around all your functions. And now when we collapse them, it looks something like this, which I prefer, because now I can open it up, a function, if I want to see the details, and not everything is collapsed. And you can quickly see the entire code. So that was the initial reason why I created this extension, but it has evolved to so much more. As you can see, if you don't have the extension, the colors of your regions will just be green, just like regular comments, which is also something that I don't really like. Yeah, and AL Toolbox gives you the opportunity to change those colors. So if I go to my settings, if I uncomment this and you go back to the code, you see that this color has changed. This color can also change if you like. It's all up to you guys. So for me, it's a lot of fun to play around with the colors and with the themes in general. It just freshens up the entire experience if you're tired of coding sometimes. Okay, so that's the main feature. Another great addition is that region functionality has been added to the product since BC 17, but my extension makes sure that you can have the region functionality even before BC 17. So let me demo that for you. Let's just undo this. If you go to your app.json, you can change your runtime. So this is the latest one. Let's put it on 3. And if I do the same action, create region, we have the same functionality that can collapse and uncollapse, but these are added so that your compiler doesn't flip out. Yeah, so the region functionality also works in the runtimes before 7 or 6. Okay, let's put this back. One nice to have that I would like to have is if I type this, that you would immediately change those, but that is not the case. Okay, moving on. Where do I also use my regions is in reports, when developing reports. This is a copy of the standard report. You might notice this because it has a lot of warnings, but it's a Microsoft report. Now, if we do the same function, create regions for all functions, triggers, and data items and columns, you see that he added those regions here. Now let me collapse. Now we can quickly navigate through the entire data set of a report. So we have the data item sales invoice header with its columns. I don't need to do something with the columns, so let's close them. This data item has another data item, the copy loop, and so on. So you can, in my opinion, quickly navigate through the entirety of a report in AL. Okay, let's let's uncollapse these again. Another great feature, and that's why I left these warnings in, is that warnings like these, open close parentheses, if you click this, you have AL Toolbox add round brackets. I think other extensions do the same thing, but here you also have the option everywhere in this document and everywhere in all documents. So quickly fix those useless warnings. Well, they're good warnings, but it's a monkey's job to fix all of them. Other than that, you also have this one, the overflow one, same functionality. You can surround with copy string, and you can do it just everywhere if you like. And then the warning is gone and it's fixed perfectly. Another great quick fix. Some warnings you might just want to ignore. And that's another feature that we added, is that we can just pragma around them. So you have the function here, surround with pragma, and then he will add this, and the warning will get ignored if my compiler reacts, unless it has two warnings. Let's try with this one. Live demo, always fun. So as you can see here, he fixed the warning. I think this one has two, so if the copy string one as well, that's not something that we're going to pragma. For these pragma warnings, we chose not to add the functionality to change it for an entire document or for every warning in your extension, because that's not why we have the pragma warning feature. You should really decide when to use this in rare cases. Okay. Another small feature is to have the description for a field. If you hover over it, you can see it here. So I made a table extension, I added a field, I added a description to tell more what this field will do. And then when I create a code unit and I hover over this field, you can see the same description. So even if this would be in a different document, this would just work. It helps in documenting your code. And this works with all fields, table extensions and new tables as well. Okay, I think I still have some time left, so let's continue. There's also a feature to generate set load fields. So for this function, we are getting the item via an item number, and we're returning description. So Business Central doesn't need to get the entire table, and Microsoft gave us this option now, and it's with set load fields. So we created an action to do this automatically for you. With set load fields, he will only get the description field of item and not all those other fields. Yeah. This also works for multiple fields. So when I do it here, you see vendor item number and description is added to the set load fields. And you can update it as well. So this is another example with description. This is commented. If I uncomment it and I do the functionality set load fields, he will just add it. Now, how to use it? You just, as I've shown you, stand in the table that you want to do the set load fields for. Because in a function, you could maybe use multiple tables and you only want to do it for one specific table. Just stand in any table. You can even stand here in your local variables, and it will just work, and he will generate this for you.
One question, Bart. Great,
Yeah.
I didn't know this one. You're using the same command every time, so the update,
Yeah.
etc. Okay.
Yeah, it's all the same command.
Typing was a little bit fast for me. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. We have a lot of features.
No, but just wanted to check. And you're not using the light bulb on the left side to do that? It's only the command on the...
no, it's a command here, because the light bulb only triggers with warnings, and there's no warning if you don't use this.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And then something that's not working as of now, it's only possible for local variables, not for parameters. So if I do it here, he won't do it. Maybe in the future, but yeah, that's one downside. Here you have to do it yourself. Okay. The next functionality that we have is related tables. It's a function create related tables. That is something that we do here at ESC. At the start of a project, we run this, and he will generate a source folder with tables that are related to each other. So, for example, the sales header, sales shipment header, sales invoice header, these are somewhat related, as you know. You need to keep the fields in sync, or your transfer fields might go badly. So that's easy for us to generate this, so we remember how we need to do this, but we took it one step further. Let me just add a field here, chicken code. So I added this to sales header, and then you can just copy fields to related tables, and he will automatically copy those over. If there would have been more fields, he would have copied all those fields over. And then obviously here, if you don't need it, put them to enabled false, of course. I'm not saying you have to create it for every field, but it's nice to keep those in sync so that there's less chance that you have an issue if another developer creates a field in a different table with the same ID.
What is the basis? What is the basis for the relation? What makes them related from this project?
Well, that's just standard NAV or Business Central. We know that these are, so these are actually hard coded for us in a setting file, but yeah, okay, you can add your own rules. So let me show you in AL Toolbox here, related tables. These don't work. Need to fix those. That's here, and I'm not finding it here.
Yeah, okay.
I think here, an example format, and you can add your own related table so that it works just like this.
Yep.
It's in a different object where we defined that those are related, and those we want to keep in sync. There's probably more, but these are the most used ones for sales, purchase, etc. Okay. Then I will continue with my demo. Another great feature is the renumber files functionality. I'm going to open another project for this. So I have a project here with the table, table extensions, so the same source tables. And you can just, if you want to renumber these, you just need to change your app.json file. So for now, this is my range, but let's change it like this. And then you have the function renumber AL objects. When I run this, he will renumber everything to your new ID range. The bigger the project, the longer it will take. This is about 90 files, I think. Okay, and he's done. And as you can see, it's renumbered to 50,000 as described in our ID range over here. Okay. Another feature that we have is to rename the prefix. So change object prefix. Let me just check what it currently is. Now it's ESB. So let's change this to ESC. He will ask you, do I change it in the settings.json? I say sure. And then again, he will rename everything, all your objects, and also all your fields. Let's check. I think I had one over here. So even the fields is now with this prefix, and I've had a code unit here as well. And here it's renamed as well. It's just a standard to rename codes that he uses, but automatically for everything. So a real time saver if you need to update the prefix. Number.
Great, Bart. We'll need to switch to Waldo, but I have a question from David Veldhof. Bart, does generate set load fields work if the local variable is handed over to a function?
I don't think so. I would test that. I haven't done it like this.
I'll write to David to test it yourself. No.
Yeah. If we had more time, I'd do it immediately. But yeah.
Of course. And another one from Darren Besant for prefix. If there wasn't one, will it add one?
No, that's also something that I'd like to create in the future, is to add prefixes. I'd really love that.
Waldo's extension does that also, I think. So I think we're going to hand off to Waldo anyway. I have to look at the time. Yeah. We're a little bit over time right now. So sorry. Are you going to change presenter? Yes.
Hello, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear and I see your slide, Waldo. Go ahead.
Okay, up to me. So I will be talking about the extensions that I have created. I'm not going to spend time to introducing myself. Let's see if this works. Yes, this. So I have been creating two extensions, one small one a little less small one. And let's start with the small one. And you might already know this, but there is an extension pack that is actually intended for anyone that develops in the AL language. And it's basically described as whatever extension that I'm using. I must admit from the extensions that I've been looking at during these webinars, and the previous webinars actually, yeah, there is a lot for me to learn yet. So in any case, all of those should have been added in the extension pack. And what is it? Very simple, an extension within VS Code that you can install, which is going to install yet again other extensions in the same VS Code. The list of extensions you can see here and here, basically, because I always try to describe and give links to the actual marketplace as well. And yeah, this basically means if you install the AL extension pack, automatically, when I decide to add an extension, it will be installed on your machine as well. Obviously, this is kind of like a downside as well, because it's kind of like an unconscious thing that's going on in the background. You will not really notice it until you actually notice it. So you don't really pay conscious attention to whatever I'm adding to your machine. On the other hand, it has served, I think, hopefully, a lot of people well, because I keep on, installing this extension, what I noticed. If there is an extension that you find is missing for AL developers, I'm always receiving feedback. Just go to the GitHub. You can simply do that by navigating to the AL extension pack marketplace, navigate to the GitHub, and you can easily find the issues here and file a request. And usually I just uptake it. I try to test it though, and uptake it in the list. If there is an extension that you really can't live with, do know that you can always simply disable it, and it will get disabled. So if you cannot live with, let's say, where is my extension? This one, you can simply disable it, disable for a workspace, or completely disable it, and it will stay disabled also when there is an update, and also when you have installed the extension pack. Okay. I think that's all for the extension pack, and then there is another one, the CRS AL Language Extension. Maybe one word about the naming, because that's maybe a little bit off. At the time I was actually creating this extension, this was merely intended to be just a tryout, like, hey, this VS Code thing, what can we do with that? I remember that I saw a session from Tobias Fenster showing like how you can run an object, for instance, and I was kind of like very interested in like, look, I want to know that as well, and I would like to dive into that. And that is actually the only intention. At that time, I was working at Cloud Ready Software. There is the CRS for, I'm not working there anymore, but I decided to keep the name CRS, as I noticed that a lot of people keep referring to it as a CRS extension, or in any case, and I don't want to confuse people. But still, the intention of the extension is just to make life easier in some cases. What I noticed is it might not be yet developed by anyone else, then I basically try it myself. But I'm by far not good in TypeScript and these kind of things. What features does it have? At the time, I started with just running an object. It still runs objects, so that's a good thing. But it does a little bit more than that. I added quite some snippets, some functionality on dependency graphs, just because I really needed that. And I do think there is some need in that in the community as well. Well, one of the biggest features is the fact that it renames files. Not just files, also, as Luc already mentioned, the prefixes and suffixes. It does some object naming for extension objects. And last but not least, it searches in documentation. So let's run into that a little bit. As said, it runs objects. Back in the days when there was a Windows client, it was able to run an object in the Windows client as well. Even in the Windows client, we were able to run more objects, like we were able to run a code unit. And while in the web client, we're not able to run too much anymore, but at least we can still use that. So if I may test that a little bit, maybe this one, just a simple table. So I have a few objects, a few options, sorry. Run an object that is kind of like any kind of objects, you will see that you get a wizard like, okay, let me do it. Just, I want to run page 60,200 in the phone client, and then it will just open that one, which doesn't work at the moment because I need to sign in. Sorry, I'm in a different screen here. Let me try if this still works. And then run the object. Well, I showed you now the wizard. Let me take the time and show you something else. There is also something that is running a current object, which kind of like takes the current object. It could be a table, it could be a page, doesn't really matter. And at the same time, we have that current object here as well in the status bar, which you can just push. And yeah, obviously going to run that object at that point. This is actually the one that I use most because you're browsing through code and you're kind of like, okay, I've got an empty table page here, whatever that means, but I just want to run it and see what's in there. And then it runs that page. It's kind of like the Control-R that we had in C-side. That's what it all started with. In the meantime, what I tend to use quite a lot as well is this publish and run object, which kind of like combines the compile, the publish, and run the current object that you're on in one command. This is while coding, in my opinion, because I use it quite a lot, quite interesting. You're developing a certain page, and you just want to see how it's going. Well, you press Ctrl-Shift-R off, and it starts compiling and running that exact page. Yeah. Okay. There are no settings whatsoever. Yeah, that's maybe interesting to mention. So the settings that it is going to get is actually from your launch JSON. I'm going to read the launch JSON, going to figure out what kind of URL that I can assemble for running that exact object or page or whatever. Does also work in a sandbox, or at least should work on the Business Central sandbox or even live. Although live I never tried. Okay. Then next part of the extension are the snippets. It's actually quite extensive. It's not extensive because I created a lot of snippets. It's mainly extensive because I copied a lot of snippets. At least I copied and improved Microsoft snippets. You might be aware of Microsoft snippets adding like global variables and redundant, or at least triggers that you don't really use on tables and these kind of things. So I kind of like cleaned them up a little bit and put them in my extension. There is no way for us to update a snippet in an existing extension. So this was my way actually to create actual useful snippets. So in that way, you will see that like the code unit snippet will be quite clean, while from Microsoft, there will be an on-run trigger and so on. Now, you might not have seen that, but if you look at the code unit snippet, you see Rasmus, his variable helper code unit variable, basically. And then you see 3 of my snippets, but you don't see the Microsoft snippets in the list anymore. That is basically because I disabled them. So that is one of the settings that is possible. And if you go to settings, you will see that there are some CRS AL language settings here as well. And let's see. Oh, I think it's disabled. I cannot type while I'm speaking. You will see here that in my extension, there is a possibility to disable my snippets, but also a possibility to disable Microsoft's snippets. And since I basically copied them and quote unquote improve them, it doesn't make any sense to have both of them, in my opinion. You can obviously disable both of them as well if you really don't like snippets. So you can obviously contribute to the snippets. Again, just browse to the GitHub, and you can do that from the marketplace and then to the project, and just create an issue here. And you will see you can also just create a pull request by forking this repository, and you will find the snippets here. It's very simple to find, and it's very simple to change as well. So if there is anything that you think needs a change, like I still have to add the implicit widths to my snippets. Sorry for that, but yeah, if these things are actually also possible, that you do that obviously as well. All right. One thing, what is very important with snippets, in my opinion, obviously, is design pattern. Snippets is not just like a find repeat, for instance, or just a procedure or a code unit. You can also have an entire design pattern. So the one that I use most and I show most as well is the method design pattern. This is a snippet that I think we use like tens, if not hundreds of times a day in the company. And yeah, it just gives us a very easy way to create a stable amount of actually a stable snippet. You know that every line of code that's in here is serving the pattern. I'm not going to forget a certain variable. I'm not going to forget to return the handled in a certain way, and so on. I'm not going to forget like the var handled and these kind of stuff. So yeah, that makes it actually quite interesting. And that's about the snippets. There are quite a lot of them. And next thing that I'm actually also quite use a lot is the dependency graphs. A visualization of multiple dependencies. Maybe I can try to sketch what we are up against in my company. We have quite a lot of apps, and this is all just part of one product. Maybe a sub product and these kind of things. And to have a decent overview of how these are linked, you can easily visualize that. Because yeah, in the app JSON, you can easily find the dependencies. So you could draw an arrow between this app and this app, for instance. And that is actually exactly what this visualization does. It has possibility to create a Graphis dependency graph, which just creates some tags and is going to display that in a certain graph. I'm not going to say this makes a lot of sense to you, but for us as creator of the product, we see that, yeah, this makes sense. We have a flat structure. You see that from left to right, and you can kind of like easily start to analyze how these dependencies work. So that is one visualization. For that visualization, because there are obviously a lot of dependencies also to test apps and to underlying apps from Microsoft, and these might be things that you would like to hide. And for that, we have settings as well. There are my settings here. Let's see if I can find them easily. Let's go to the CRS and see dependency. I think I need to go to CRS again then. And you see here you can exclude app names, exclude publishers. So usually I will exclude a Microsoft app because I'm actually just interested in the dependencies to my own apps. And you can like remove some prefixes and stuff like that just to make the graph a little bit more useful. Now, this might be familiar to you because in the launch event, there was something that was called the DGML generator that you could call from the compiler. And For us to be able to do that, we need to call the alc.exe a certain way. I just wanted to make that a little bit easier to you. Let's just say I would like to have DGML for this project. I can now just compile DGML, and it will just call that exact alc.exe a certain way. It's basically with this tag here, and it's going to generate that DGML, which you can now just open in Visual Studio, and again, which is going to create you again a dependency graph, but another kind of dependency graph, a DGML. I'm not going to go too much into that, simply because I wouldn't be able to do so. I'm personally not using this just yet, but at least I made this parameter a little bit easier for you to get at, for you to be able to create your own DGMLs from your own project. Again, there are no settings. It's just going to take the settings from the default project. Then the rename and the reorganized, I think mostly used in of the extension. Well, this has a history, obviously, and from the moment I saw some kind of, for us, the fact that we needed to comply with a certain naming convention for files, I decided, like, look, I don't want to put my developers through the pain of maintaining file names and stuff like that. So I started to build that within the extension as well. It was a bigger job than I intended. In any case, now we are able to not just automatically rename a file to a right file name that Microsoft expects us. There's even a code rule for us to comply with. You can also just come up with your own patterns as well. And that's a good thing, because Microsoft changed their wishes in terms of file naming conventions as well. So in a way, it's quite easy. Actually, there is a file name pattern, a file name pattern for extensions, and file name pattern for page customizations as well. So there are, in my opinion, there are three kinds of files, just normal AL files, page and table extensions, and there are page customizations as well. And for the three kinds of files, there are three patterns. Do you have this, by the way, this pattern is the general, this is the current accepted file name pattern, let's say, for Microsoft. And there is a way to generate that. And that is the CRS configure best practice file naming. It's a function that Jacob made because he hated to set it up manually. So he just created a function and pull requested that in this extension. So if you execute this, it will generate these three patterns. And you might say, like, why don't you do it just by default? Well, this has a history. People have been using it with different patterns. And if I just change the default, and then I'm going to change the default behavior of people that are already using this in the previous pattern. So that's something that I don't want to do. I don't want to make it harder for you, just easier for you. So that's why, you need to do that yourself to set up a decent file name pattern. This setting is actually to make it automatic, meaning from the moment you say, like, look, I have a new code unit, and I save it, automatically it's going to set the file name as you see here. If you don't set it on save file action, it's just not going to do anything, and you need to run the rename command yourself. On top of that, there is this extension object name pattern. Just imagine that you're creating a table extension like this for customers, for the customer table. Now, you can already guess, like for the customer table, I would like to have like a default pattern being like customer and then some kind of ext, and then obviously a prefix or suffix as well. Well, if I save this one, you will see that it will exactly do that. But it will only do that when you have set up an actual pattern for the extension object name pattern. Right? Which brings us actually to prefixing and suffixing as well. So you are able to manage suffix and prefix and basically make sure that you don't forget it. And you can do that by simply set up a prefix and or a suffix. You can set up both. I strongly recommend you not to set up both. We are moving to using suffixes because that makes things more readable. And as you can see here, I will automatically set up a suffix, and you kind of like already saw that. You will see a suffix here. If I would have done that with the code unit, which I did in a minute ago, let's see. If I would save this one automatically, it will add the suffix. Okay. You might not want that in the file name, and for that is the last setting here, remove suffix from file name. Just makes stuff a little bit more readable.
Well, Waldo, what happens if you I haven't tried that myself. I always was wondering what happens if you define a suffix and a prefix. You get them both?
Yeah, and then you get them both.
Okay.
Exactly.
Having an eye on time. One last part for you.
Yeah, I'm almost done.
Right.
So what I wanted to show you as well is if you would do a field here. Sorry, I'm a little bit struggling. And say that one is going to add the prefix there as well. So all places, and if not all places, I would like to have that feedback, but all places that need a prefix or a suffix, it will add the prefix suffix. In this case, it will not read it from your app source code JSON. So you need that extra setting here as well in your settings. Okay. Last but not least, this is just again what I already explained in slides, so I'm going to just skip over this. Last is the documentation part. So I'm at search part. Sorry. So I'm made it a little bit easier to search documentation. Quite easy. If you just encode and you're selecting some kind of word, just type docs. That's what I do, and you will start to search docs for exactly that. And it's going to search Business Central docs. Yeah, so Business Central topics. Same for Google, and quite the same. Well, there's also a search object names, which is a way to search, yeah, for object names. Like, let's just say, like, I have some timings objects with the name timings and something. It just makes it a little bit easy. It's going to apply some kind of regex to the search string, and only will find the objects that has the word timings, in this case, in it. Just that is actually all that I wanted to share, and I think, yeah, I went over time. Sorry for that. Rasmus, I'm going to change to you.
We'll probably go a little bit over time. But Rasmus said that he only needed no. But thank you, Waldo. I don't have any questions from the attendees. With the last one, I knew quite some of the others, but the last one I didn't. You made my day. I'm using that a lot, and me and regex, I'll find my way, but it's always, I need to relearn it again. Thank you very much, Waldo. The floor is yours, Rasmus.
Well, thank you. So my name is Rasmus, and I'm the lead developer at JCD in Denmark. For me to go into all this VS Code and extensions, I would like to introduce you to some backstory, because back when I learned about programming and development, we already had IntelliSense. So going through C-side and developing in C-side were kind of tedious for me. So this was kind of why I wanted to introduce some of the features that we had from the development languages that I grew up with and implemented within VS Code. So that's where I'm from. I started developing extension in 2016, and probably a lot of you did try to work with the extensions back in 2016. And I deep dived straight into all this AL when it first were introduced in 2018. Back then, I created something called the AL formatter, because everything was kind of working like you grabbed all your code from C side, try to convert it with the text files, and then you had kind of this big mess of code. So back then, before we had anything called formatter within the Microsoft AL extension, I created this sort of working AL formatter tool to kind of structure code, make it easier to navigate and look into your code with the new AL format. My idea back then was to create something that was straight to the point and as simple as and as efficient as I could make it. The AL formatter were introduced by Microsoft a year later, I think, which made me create a new extension internally at JCD, where we have this with one extension that manages everything that the developer does on a daily basis. So creates Docker environments and manages repositories and all that stuff. I introduced some of the tools that I had in the AL formatter to our internal extension, and later on I came up with the idea that maybe some of the features were also great for the general public. So instead of only having it internally, I created what is now called the AL variable helper. And I tried to, again, make it as simple as possible and as efficient as possible. So instead of introducing a bunch of features, I kind of implemented features where I needed it. So the AL variable helper is only doing a couple of things, but I think it does it quite well. So trying to keep it simple. If you don't like it, you can always disable it, and you wouldn't miss a bunch of other features. If you like it, it doesn't clutter your VS Code environment with a bunch of features that you might not need because that's put in somewhere else. So that's where I'm coming from. To be very precise, the exact features that I've been focusing on creating in the AL variable helper is, of course, to have this automatic suggestion of variable names. So in the couple of last Dynamics Nav C-side environments, we were actually able to get automatic variable suggestions to records and code units and stuff. And I thought that was quite a neat feature that we missed in VS Code when we made the switch. So I created my own version of the same thing, which suggests variable names depending on which records and code units or whatever you're creating. Some history from the AL formatter is that the AL formatter had these features to sort variables depending on, if you have local variables and global variables. There is a prefixed sorting of your variables. You have to have, for instance, records first, code units, and so forth. This one feature does exactly that and just sorts it so you have a neat presentation of your variables. There is another feature where you can jump through variables from local to globals, and then the same feature exactly as Bart presented it in the beginning, where you can add parentheses and fix keywords. So, if you are grabbing code from your C side, you would have keywords with large casings. This would kind of fix it and try and put it in more in AL-like casing. So if I switch to my project right here, I can show you some of the features. So the first feature is this feature where you can add variables. I can get a suggestion, of course, of the tables. Let me pick customer. And then I have this feature. This is the variable helper. So I have three options I can pick from for variable naming. It is the full name, it is an abbreviation of the name, and it's just a short tag. So depending on who you are and what kind of situation you're in, it will suggest these three options always, and you can pick whatever you like the most. the abbreviations is picked from the Microsoft abbreviation document, so it should be correct according to the Microsoft standard. I'll just create this. I have this. I'll just create another record up here. Vendor. So the next feature is that I jump through variables quite a lot, swapping things around. So when it's impossible to know where your global and local variable is, it's quite easy in this object. But if you don't know where it is, I can always click Control G. Let me see if I can do it. Control G to jump to my global variables. And of course, the same is for local variables, Control L, which is kind of a similar feature to the seaside environment, where you could go straight to your global variables or local variables with the same commands. I think this feature has also been implemented in a couple of varieties, so I might disable it in this extension. The next feature I would like to show is what happens when you create variables in a bunch and everything is just cluttered together. Let me just create a couple of sales header and a code unit. So right here, everything is cluttered. My label should be on the bottom and so forth. Text should be kind of where it is. Record should be on the top. So if I use my command, which is called AL var sort variables, this will swap everything around and put it in a neat manner where you have the correct variables in the correct order, and it's sorted by alphabetical naming of your variables. So it's kind of, if you go through your objects, you can make it kind of neat, and every developer can have your the same structure of your variables. So that helps a lot. The last feature I would like to show is actually because I built a lot of this based on the NAV 2018 implementation of the VS Code and the AL language, where there was a lot of copying code from C-side. So if you notice right here, there's a bunch of variables which is missing parentheses and is with the wrong casing. And if I go here and I say AL var fix casing, it should fix all these. And that's kind of the features that's included in the AL variable hover. Yes, any questions?
There's no question on the list, but the last part you demoed, of course, I guess if only parentheses are failing, that it fills in the parentheses. It doesn't need to have a function name find set all in caps. As soon as a function does have no parentheses, it will add it.
Not in this solution.
Okay. So if you would now remove the parentheses from find set and then call your function again, it will not add the parentheses.
Oh, it will add it right here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
okay.
but not on functions, like Bart were doing it. Not on functions.
Okay.
It's kind of like if you take your code from C side and paste it in here, you can use this function to take all the Microsoft keywords and rename them in the correct casing.
Yeah, there's a question now coming in from Ajagyapi, if I pronounce it right, sorry if I don't. What about text and label? Is it also decide and fix? I don't know exactly what you mean, Ajagyapi. So what do you mean, what about text and label? Do you get, Rasmus, what he's pointing at?
Okay, can you elaborate?
Yeah, the text is literally, what about text and label? It also decide and fix? So,
the infix, so like a question right here. No, it doesn't apply those. It doesn't apply those.
Okay. We're in time right now. You promised not to be longer than 10 minutes. Well, I promise you said so. Thank you very much. We're at the end of the hour, and in that sense, nicely projected, guys. Bart, Waldo, Rasmus, thank you very much. It was very instructive. I learned a couple of new things, and I surely will be using some parts of each of your extensions that I haven't used before. And I guess that applies to many of us. So thank you very much. I'm going to make myself presenter just to show the closing slide. And thank everybody for being here. And see you in 2 weeks' time with the next session on well, the follow-up on the next 3 AL extensions for VS Code. So thanks everybody for being here.